I don't think of things as being beautiful. I think of my paintings as being something that gives you some sense of calm and understanding about something maybe that has been missing from one's life. Well, I've always believed that emptiness, or the trying to say as much as you can with as little as possible. I think that comes right back then to what haiku poetry is about. The fact that you can read a 5-line poem and understand, of course, yeah, I had forgotten about the sound of the splash in a pond, and knowing then that's been a frog. And so you write about that instant moment. And so you try to then come up with something that will be translated visually, that by looking at the work, because it certainly is free from any objectified forms, it's basically then shapes and colors and so on. And trying to put those things together in some kind of reasonable manner that translates that sense that's required by the viewer to be able to understand what I'm doing. I've certainly been trained as a traditional oil painter, and doing all the typical still lifes and landscapes and portraits and all that, and you learn really fundamental things about handling paint. About 8 years ago, based on a premise that I had, which then transitioned my work into now the use of chalk as the medium that I use. I dissolve it, and I'm able to apply it in different ways. A lot of the colors that I use over the years has always been grayed to the point where I want to make sure that it's grayed enough with complementary colors so they're almost kind of muddy in appearance. And I've always believed then that the edges of paintings were crucial, and I always took things out, and if they were partially obscured by the edge of the painting, was important for me. So I think I see that as having the entire surface as the format in which I have to take advantage of. Based on then my Asian culture, and even though I did not embrace it early on, but I've come to understand what it's about at a little later age, I find there's certain things that you just absorb through family life, through the way that you were brought up, the household of your mother and father, and so on. As much as I see myself as an American, and yet the things that my dad used to do, I mean, he was an immigrant at an early age, he used to do the flower arranging in the house. Then got to a point where he was growing chrysanthemums, and he's one of these people who you take a chrysanthemum and then you pinch off all of the side branches and you end up with one singular blossom. I felt that it meant so much to him that I decided, I said, okay, I'll use that as the premise, and did a whole series of things based on the chrysanthemum, and eventually then the progression through his life. Ever since I could remember then, during the holiday year, especially New Year's Day, my mother then used to pound mochi, which is the rice pounded into a rice cake. And then she would have these to indicate the new year, and there were usually 3 mounds, 3 sizes, and they were all put on top of each other. And usually the very top one was maybe either a persimmon or a tangerine or something, just to add a little bit of color. But I've always thought about that shape in reference to New Year's. I pull it up every so often when I think it's appropriate. I don't always use it. I find that I'm letting go of it more as I continue working. So yeah, it's interesting how the transition from shapes to shapes to shapes. When my daughter was attending school, one of the assignments they had midterm was to go then to the sites in which the Japanese Americans were interned during the Second World War. And after that experience, she called me from school and said that, Dad, you need to really get down there and take a look at the place where you were for 3 years. And I had not thought about that at all. It's been 50 years had passed. And the campsite, all that was left is just the kind of supports in which the barracks had sat on. And all the barracks were gone, and there was not any indication at all, except for we can see where the roads were. All of a sudden, I was flashed with this image of my dad getting up in the morning and so on, walking out of the front of the barracks, going down and taking water from the pond and splashing it on his face, because we didn't have any running water in the barracks. And I said, well, that's my dad's pond. And I had forgotten about it. It moved me so much to be there, because I said, gee, I remember this. And everything came back after 50 years. So then I came back to my studio after that visit, and I knew I had to do something with that. And so I knew that they had to be drawings and not paintings. even today, I find myself then after I've had a discussion with a client or whatever, and they always make comment about the fact that the teacher in me that comes out. And I think that teaching for as many years as I have certainly has made a difference in the way that I think about art, translating ideas and trying to explain to lay people what this process is about, this very seclusive work. You know, you work in isolation. You're not dealing with anybody else but yourself. Thank goodness that I'm with people who represent my work. Don't ever question, about the direction my work is going. They take it for what it is, and I'm pleased that they're happy with it.